Thank you. First of all, a little bit about AEP, American Electric Power, so I don't have to pay the fine. American Electric Power serves about 5 million customers in the United States. We operate in 11 U.S. states. That gives us the opportunity and the challenge of operating in 3 different regional transmission organizations. In PJM, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, which, by the way, we're in Ohio and West Virginia and Virginia, not any of those, but we're in PJM in the eastern part of our system, in the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, and also in ERCOT. So we operate in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, a little piece of Tennessee, Virginia, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. So we get to see a lot of different things in those 11 states. We have the largest transmission system in the United States with 39,000 miles of transmission in place. So I'm going to talk a little bit differently, mainly about technology solutions, as we would like to call them. As we look at challenges that we have in the industry for you policymakers, the things we hear that are needed, we try to address those by responding with some facility-oriented technology solutions. And I'm not going to share all of them by any means, but I'd like to share a few of them during the day. I'll apologize for any acronyms I use, but I will challenge you to an acronym contest. I'm not sure that we engineers necessarily use and employ more acronyms than policymakers sometimes do. So I'm willing to bet you on that one. The operational context is because of the restructuring of the industry, because of public policy issues, there's a significant shifting of the ground under us in terms of generation, where it is, where it has been, where it will be. And the transmission system is a transportation system, and it's designed to transport bulk amounts of power from sources to loads. When you dislocate the sources or put them in new places, and, oh, by the way, you disintegrate the planning that was integrated in the past to a market model, it changes the game. And it's important that we recognize that the transmission system that was built was not built for some of the uses it has today. So there is a need for some transformation and evolution of the transmission grid in order to adapt to those changes in the way we operate the system today. So shifting generation sources and their locations, the nature of those sources, whether they're variable, whether they're more sure. And that makes a big difference as well in how you operate your grid. There are evolving policies related to who plans, whose backyard it gets built in, and who pays, and very importantly, who decides those things and what is the process for deciding them and how long does it take to decide them. There is now an emerging issue of competition for who gets to build it. And that is an interesting new challenge that we who own transmission facilities face. The expectations appropriately and necessarily, because of the dependence upon electricity today and how it's used as compared to days past, is that reliability and resiliency of the grid need to rise. We need more reliable and more resilient systems to deal with the challenges we face both from nature and, unfortunately, perhaps man. We also have a real issue that's looming that the sky won't fall all in one day, but there are issues ahead of us with aging infrastructure and our aging workforce, which must be dealt with. Those are some of the challenges. I guess if you were doing it in the whereas, therefore be it resolved, these are the whereases. And the technology, therefore be it resolves, or here's some things maybe that we would like to focus on in our scope of technology strategy. We want to be more aware of our system conditions. We heard about synchrophaser technology. By the way, 30 years ago when I was first joining AEP, a lot of the early innovation in creating that concept was in our company at AEP. And it's been 30 years. We're still talking a lot about it. We need some practical applications to make ourselves more aware. You drive the grid. The MISO, PJM, and all the others, the operators who operate the system, are driving the grid from a rearview mirror. They're looking at the state of the system in the past and trying to say, what can happen? How do I drive this car and keep it on the road, looking in my rearview mirror? Synchrophasers allow you to at least see the road at your rear bumper and not a mile behind you. A lot can happen in 5 seconds on an electric grid. And if your state of the system and its awareness is only updated every 5 seconds, that's slow in our world. So awareness of the system and decision support for the operators, not just making them aware and, oh my God, I see the train wreck coming, but what do I do? So system awareness along with tools. Competitive design, well, we would like to build stuff. That's what we do. It's one of the ways we actually get compensated for what we do. If we don't build, it's difficult for us to earn. So that's the model that we have in our industry. So we think we do well. We're the largest transmission company in the US. We'd like to stay that way and keep building it. So it's important that we learn how to be competitive in this new world. We want to make sure we achieve operational excellence in reliability, in resiliency, in efficiency. And of course, we want to address public policy issues about integrating renewables, etc. It's important that our technologies help permit those things. And then finally, we want to learn how to do these things faster. Unfortunately, like many other things, it takes a really long time to decide what to do. Once you get permission to do it, there's very little time to get it done in the time frame it needs to be done to meet the need of the grid. So our ability to build things faster, process things faster, etc., are very important to our success. And they also feed some of these other technology focus areas. So we're looking at what can we do to make things better? How can we help in this transformation of the transmission system? And my first point here is get more grid, and by that, it necessarily does mean we will occasionally need some more lines. It doesn't only mean that. It means what do we get when I build that line? How can I use the right-of-way I already have to get more capacity? And I'm going to talk about a couple of examples that we're working on at AEP that might be of interest to you all and others in the industry. First, an acronym, which I'll explain later, the BOLD, high capacity, low profile line design, which gets more capacity in the right-of-way at a lower height. The live line reconductoring of a project in Texas. Besides getting more grid, we need to get a smarter grid. In transmission, we don't particularly, I sort of have an allergic reaction to smart grid. We like to call it a smarter grid. Transmission already has many aspects of automated response that the distribution grid would like to have in their smart grid. But a smarter grid means knowing more about your system through synchrophaser technology and other things, being more aware of what's going on in your system, what is its health, what is its state, and what are the things that are possible that could come, and how do I respond to those? And then an asset health center. So besides the system and holding the system together, the system is a system of component parts, individual pieces of major equipment. And we don't really have a very strong idea of what is today's state of health of each individual asset. We do that by inspecting it periodically. So the Asset Health Center I'll tell you about is a way of us knowing more up to now, right to the moment. What is the health of that equipment? And then finally, get stronger. I mean, how do you get a stronger grid that's hardened against attacks of nature, attacks of man? And if it is so attacked, how do you respond? How do you make it more resilient? How do you make sure that you can get things back more quickly? We won't be able to control whether another natural event like a storm Sandy occurs, but we may be able to control how ready we are for it and how well we respond. So the new BOLD line design, it stands for Breakthrough Overhead Line Design. And the breakthrough is we're trying to go where no one has gone before. We're trying to shrink the envelope, compact the design. And by compacting that design, we get nearly 50% more capacity on the same voltage. And that also reduces the height of, in this case, a 345 kV line by about 1/3. It's about 100 feet tall instead of 150 feet tall for a double circuit 345 kV tower. It's intended to be cost competitive in terms of how much power it delivers per mile, though it clearly will be a little more expensive itself in comparison with its alternatives that don't have that capacity. It also, in Texas, the creative renewable energy zones that were made in Texas to bring a lot of wind power and integrate it into where the load was, which was where the wind was not, required us really pressing the 345 kV native voltage designs. And we had to compensate those lines with special apparatus called series capacitors. It makes the lines kind of behave like they're shorter. But they're complex. They introduce another mode of failure, another thing to maintain. They have a lot of complications that they create in the way you protect the system for events. So what if we could build a line that didn't require that had intrinsically that capability without the need to put crutches on it in order for it to carry that load level? So that's the concept behind this line. We also know that despite the fact we engineers, particularly our structural engineers, we don't understand why people don't love the sheer artistry of the appearance of transmission lines. But not everybody wants one in their backyard. Someone eventually has to have it in their backyard or on their farm or somewhere. And so if you're going to do it, can we make it look more aesthetically acceptable? Can we make it more elegant? And so this line attempts to do that as well. By having the arched bow arm, a single cross arm, not three, and by having tubular construction and having that shorter profile, it's our thought that this will be much more palatable and acceptable to folks than the traditional structures that you see on the left side of the bottom picture, or a lattice tower that we have in a lot of our legacy transmission. We do have patents pending on this new design. We're in the process of getting it tested at the Electric Power Research Institute right now, and plan to begin construction of the very first one of these in February of next year in Indiana. Another problem we have is it takes a long time to build transmission. And the problems that are identified through the planning process doesn't always allow you reliably a lot of time to solve them. So we had a case in Texas where there was a problem in the what we call the Valley of Texas, which is that spot where the Gulf of Mexico, Texas, and Mexico all come together. It's one of the faster growing areas of our system, a lot of electric demand there. And they needed pretty desperately to get more transmission capacity into that area. If we were to build another line, that would take many, many years to go through the whole process. If we were to rebuild the lines that exist, we would have to take those very lines, so critical as arteries of power into that area of Texas, out of service for extended period of time to rebuild them. So working with our contractors, we came up with a way where we could actually rebuild that line while not taking it out of service. And so that's another approach to how we can execute things more quickly. Critically important, it does raise the risk of the construction project. It's critically important that you do these things safely so that your employees, your contractors go home safely and in good condition each and every day. It uses a new advanced conductor, and I'll explain the acronym is an aluminum conductor composite core. It allows you to put more load on the conductor and it sags less. So vegetation issues, etc., sometimes define how much load you can put on a line. If it sags less, you can put more load on it before it's critically important. So it also uses that kind of conductor. So it's more conductor in the same diameter, it's more capability, you can load it heavier. So we got an upgraded line without ever taking it out of service to help solve the problem in that part of Texas. So what's our vision on the components? Difficult it is to know the condition. So we, as an industry, we put 100 years worth plus of assets out there, and we traditionally have done time-based maintenance. You go inspect it and you determine, is it healthy or unhealthy? Or it simply unexpectedly fails or trips out of service. That's maybe not the best model for improving the reliability of your system. So our vision, where we're heading, is to be masters of our assets and no longer their slaves. We would like to know the condition of all of our assets at all times, everywhere, and not just know that to wring our hands and worry, oh my goodness, it might fail. What do we do about it? What is wrong with it? What's the kit I need to bring? And what do I do about it? Learning from other industries in that respect. So there are three purposes of this Asset Health Center. It's focused on transformers, circuit breakers, and batteries for the moment. Batteries purely from a compliance perspective. We can't really, we couldn't really justify that alone if it weren't for the compliance risks that those things pose to us. But on those three kind of components, we have three purposes of the Asset Health Center. Prevent some failures. We will not prevent them all. We cannot prevent them all. We'll be happy if we can prevent some, maybe on the order of 20%. To optimize maintenance, meaning you let the equipment tell you, I'm the one that needs your attention. I'm unhealthy. Please come fix me. And oh, by the way, this is what's wrong. So when you bring the truck, don't come out first to inspect and figure out what's wrong. Come with the right stuff to fix what's wrong. And then also, thirdly, that aging asset base I talked about, where do you start? Where do you start? The numbers would knock your socks off if we were to say, take everything that's fully depreciated or take everything that's reached the end of its defined useful life out of service and replaced it, it would treble the installed base in many cases, rate base. So where do you start so that you deal with the worst problems first? Well, this Asset Health Center is intended to let us know which devices are closest to the end of their useful life and help us prioritize so we do the most good with the dollars we spend on that. The situation at AEP, for example, is that about 1/3 of our transformers are power transformers. We're not talking about distribution here. We're talking about transmission and distribution substation power transformers, big transformers. About 1/3 of those are more than 50 years old. And a good number, almost 20%, are 50 years old. 50 years and 60 years. And then the aging assets have a lot of problems with them. Number one, they tend to fail more often. They tend to have more maintenance costs, et cetera, et cetera. So they wind up contributing to a lot of nagging trouble on our system. So dealing with them, the worst offenders first, is really helpful. So the Asset Health Center is intended to be a timely and transformational technology that brings together a lot of things to automate some of this analysis so we don't have to roll trucks to find out what condition is. And we know about it much more timely. Right now we're in the middle of implementing the platform for this, and the monitoring is being installed on new equipment. As it is delivered, we will do retrofits in kind of bands as we learn how to do this so that we can be as effective as we can on the most important equipment. And then related to a stronger grid, I don't have a whole lot of specifics here. This is more, I would say, in the beginning of the conversation on this point. And on the beginning of the conversation, we need to assess what the threat is, learn from our history. We need to address both a prioritization framework of how do we strengthen the grid, how do we harden it, how do we prevent events, and then how do we respond once they occur. We're working together in the industry on a number of the North American Transmission Forum, Electric Power Research Institute, and others are working pretty vigorously on taking a look at that. And then finally realizing synergies. There's a lot of things that I've talked about that if you can weave these together, they all work together. So you can get more capacity with less right-of-way. You can make a stronger grid by having more grid in the least, the least space you can put it in. And it can be smarter, quicker, more adaptable. You know a little bit more about it. You can prevent some of the problems. And then more spare equipment. We need to really talk about how do we do that to prepare ourselves for attacks or major storms. What's the right balance there? So these are some of the thoughts that I have. And after all of the panelists have concluded, I'd be happy to take your questions.